The snow came down in thick, relentless sheets, the kind that swallowed streetlights and turned the whole city into a silent white blur. It was December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, and the temperature had plummeted so fast that even the plows couldn't keep up. Alexander Pierce stepped out of the glass doors of Pierce Technologies at 7:42 p.m., collar turned up on his charcoal overcoat, breath clouding in front of him. At 42, he was the youngest self-made billionaire in the state. Tall, dark-haired, always perfectly put together. The magazines called him the Ice King of Tech. They weren't wrong. His wife Emily had died in a car crash 6 winters ago. Since then, Alexander had built higher walls than any firewall he'd ever coated. Work was easier than grief. Success was cleaner than tears. His penthouse was beautiful, spotless, and completely empty. He was halfway down the block, boots crunching through fresh powder, when he saw her. A tiny girl sat on the bottom step of a shuttered flower shop, knees pulled to her chest. Blonde curls escaped a pink knit hat that had slipped sideways. Her coat, too thin, too small, was dusted white. She couldn't have been more than 5. No adult in sight. Alexander's first instinct was to keep walking. Someone else would handle it. That's what security guards and social services were for. But she looked up. Big blue eyes, red-rimmed from cold, locked onto his. And in the clearest, bravest little voice he'd ever heard, she said, "You look like you need a daughter, mister." 7 words. 7 words that hit him harder than any market crash ever had. Something cracked wide open in his chest, sharp, painful, unstoppable. Tears welled up before he could stop them, hot against the freezing air. He crouched in the snow, expensive coat be damned. What did you say, sweetheart?" She stood up slowly, legs trembling from cold, and walked straight to him. Tiny mittened hands reached out and touched his wet cheeks like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't have a daddy anymore," she whispered. "And you look so sad. Mommy says when people are sad at Christmas, they need family." Alexander couldn't speak. His throat burned. "What's your name?" he finally managed. "Emma Grace Thompson," she said proudly. "I'm 5.5. "Emma Grace," he repeated, the name tasting like grace itself. "Where's your mommy?" Her little face crumpled. "She's in heaven. She got sick last year. Now it's just me and Grandma. But Grandma fell this morning and the ambulance took her. The nice neighbor said to wait inside, but I wanted to find someone who looked like they needed a little girl for Christmas." Tears streamed down his face now. He didn't care who saw. Emma reached up and wiped them with her mitten. "It's okay, mister. Grown-ups cry too. Mommy told me." That was it. The moment the Ice King melted completely. Alexander scooped her up, tiny, freezing, perfect, and wrapped his massive coat around her. She weighed almost nothing. "You're not waiting in the snow anymore," he said, voice thick. "You're coming with me." Emma laid her head on his shoulder without hesitation. "Okay," she said softly. "I trusted you the minute I saw you." He carried her the 3 blocks to his building, snow still swirling, heart pounding harder than it ever had during a boardroom takeover. Inside the warm lobby, the doorman's jaw dropped. "Mr. Pierce?" "Call Dr. Harris," Alexander ordered. "Tell her it's an emergency, then get legal on the phone. And someone find the warmest children's pajamas in the city, now." Emma looked around the marble lobby with wide eyes, but stayed curled against his chest, utterly unafraid. An hour later, after hot chocolate, a pediatrician's exam, and a mountain of paperwork already in motion, Alexander sat on the floor of his living room, once cold and museum-like, surrounded by hastily delivered toys. Emma, now in footy pajamas covered in tiny reindeer, climbed into his lap. "Are you really going to keep me?" she asked, voice small for the first time. He cupped her face gently. "Emma Grace, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. You are my daughter now, tonight, tomorrow, forever. Fresh tears, this time happy ones, filled her eyes. "I prayed so hard for a daddy who looked lonely," she whispered. "God must have heard me real good." Alexander held her close as she fell asleep against his heartbeat, the Christmas tree lights twinkling for the first time in 6 years. The adoption was final before New Year's. 5 years later, the penthouse roared with laughter. Balloons covered the ceiling. A giant banner read, "Happy 10th birthday, Emma Grace Pierce." Alexander, now daddy to everyone who mattered, watched his daughter blow out candles while surrounded by friends, grandparents he'd flown in, and a new baby brother who had arrived 2 years earlier. Emma ran to him after the song, throwing her arms around his neck. "Daddy?" "Yes, princess? Remember the night you found me in the snow?" "Every single day." She grinned, blue eyes sparkling. "Best Christmas present ever." He kissed the top of her blonde head, tears threatening again. "No, baby girl," he whispered. "You were mine." Sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't built in boardrooms. Sometimes they're found freezing on a sidewalk, wearing a too small coat and carrying 7 words strong enough to melt a frozen heart. Sometimes love doesn't knock. It just looks up with big blue eyes and says, "You look like you need a daughter." And in that moment, 2 lonely souls become a family, not by blood, but by the purest kind of magic. The kind that only happens when someone brave enough to ask meets someone finally ready to say yes. And they both lived happily, loudly, beautifully ever after, surrounded by laughter, Christmas lights, and the sweetest little girl who taught a billionaire the only stock that never crashes is love. Because sometimes the greatest gifts come in the smallest, snow-dusted packages, with blonde curls and 7 perfect words that change everything.